Hi, my name is King Pineda. This is my informative speech. The title of my speech is Pot Dope Reefer. It's marijuana. The general purpose of my speech is to inform, while the specific purpose of my speech is to explain the differences in the pros and cons of marijuana use. Throughout history, marijuana, a psychoactive drug that comes from the cannabis plant, has received a negative stigma that is often connected to the belief of it being a harmful and addictive substance that often causes its users to eventually use more harder and darker drugs. But as more evidence and research arises, there's actually a lot about marijuana that we once did not know about, especially things regarding its health benefits. In an article published on the Taylor and Francis online website, it discusses the beliefs and perceived risk of marijuana use. Specifically, in this article on adolescence, however, it does discover that depending on the way the usage is viewed and how the substance is actually being used, can help determine one's point of view on how the effects of marijuana affects an individual. So either good and safe or bad and addictive. With marijuana being so heavily used in today's society when it was once declared and considered a gateway drug to it now being widely accepted and normalized, I would like to understand what it actually is and what the health benefits are so that other people will have a better general basic knowledge and understanding of the substance. Marijuana, as I stated, is a psychoactive drug that comes from the cannabis plant. It has suffered a bad representation throughout the years, which has made it harder for society to truly understand what it is. But as more time passed, it has been proven to be quite beneficial, and I would like to touch up on the health benefits that come with marijuana use, as well as dismantle the negative stigma that it is often surrounded by. Throughout the speech, I will go over the history of marijuana and the negative misconceptions about it, the benefits that come with its use, as well as the cons that come with its use, and how society has begun to understand what marijuana actually is. Its usage, which likely originated in Asia around 500 BC, was not originally used for intoxication purposes, but was used for healing and medicine purposes to create healing remedies, medicine, and even herbal medicines. Although hemp was grown at some point to create materials, some ancient cultures were aware of its mind-altering effects and incorporated it in their tribals and cultural practices. This is supported by evidence of things like burnt cannabis seeds being found in the graves of shamans in China and Siberia. Later on in the 1800s, it was determined that cannabis use can actually help lessen the pain of stomach pain and vomiting of those suffering from cholera. In the 1900s, recreational marijuana use began to be widely um, introduced to the American culture, mainly through Mexican immigrants around the time of the Mexican Revolution. However, in the 1930s, a resentment however, in the 1930s, when the Great Depression began to take place, a resentment of Mexican immigrants and marijuana use began to heighten as unemployment was as low as ever, and a social unrest began to take place. This eventually led to the fear and belief in marijuana being evil. As stated on history.com, the agriculture effect of marijuana in America started off as growing hemp to make textiles, rope, and its seeds were even used as food. But the involvement of politics and racial factors is what caused it to later become criminalized in the 20th century. The risks and benefits of marijuana have been speculated for quite some time, and people's opinion on the effects of marijuana often vary depending on person and even user. The common misconceptions of marijuana are seem to be up in the air, but NCBI.gov posted an article that addresses what people mainly think of the effects of cannabis. The article was conducted through a series of surveys which took note of all participants' opinions. It stated that overall 81% of adults believe cannabis to have at least one benefit, whereas the other 17 believed it to have none. The benefits that these people were referring to were things like um, um, uh, pain relief, treatment of certain diseases, reducement of anxiety, depression, and stress. And it also stated that 91% of adults believe cannabis to have at least one risk, whereas the other 9% believed it to not have none. The risks that these people were often referring to were things like addiction, legal troubles, impaired memory, and even increased use of other drugs. After getting a general and basic understanding of how society tends to view marijuana, I visited a site, health.com, which provided a list of pros and cons of marijuana use. It stated that marijuana can greatly help those with anxiety and PTSD when in small doses, but can also do the exact opposite and worsen your anxiety if a much higher or more potent amount is ingested, inhaled, or indulged in. It then continues to state that cannabis can be used to relieve chronic pain, nausea, and even insomnia. It states that it can also benefit those with diseases such as epilepsy, and how it's a much safer alternative than opioids, and is in fact not a gateway drug when actually marijuana tends to reduce the dependency of more life-threatening drugs. This site also states that parents who use cannabis should also be aware of the effects and risk of being marijuana users while being parents, while a study in 2016 showed that more pregnant women were using marijuana while carrying their child, which is highly discouraged as prenatal exposure to marijuana can later lead to birth defects. It also says the obvious about some risk while using cannabis, like existing heart problems, how you should still not operate anything while under the influence, and um, how cannabis smoke is still smoke. Although marijuana has suffered a bad representation throughout the years, we have now become more aware and educated on what exactly it is and how it works, now learning that it is mainly a non-harmful substance that can be used medically but is mainly used in American culture recreationally. Despite how harsh society used to treat and look at marijuana, it has since been looked at with evidence and statistics to prove its benefits and finally diminished the idea that it is a harmful substance, which eventually led to it being decriminalized in several states and other states in the process of doing so, even releasing those who were once imprisoned over marijuana charges. An article published on CNBC.com on January 6, 2021, talked about a bill that would decriminalize marijuana called the MORE Act, which stands for Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, which will decriminalize or rather legalize marijuana on a federal level and begin sweeping regulations reforms surrounding the drug. According to NBCNews.com, months before the bill got passed, it was up for debate and speculation on whether or not the Senate would pass the bill, but it was mentioned at the time that the bill would not only decriminalize the substance, but would also erase nonviolent federal convictions of marijuana, allow veterans to get medical marijuana recommendations, and would begin to fund sources in communities that were wrongfully affected by the war on drugs. Marijuana is a substance that has had a great history in cultural healings and traditions, but eventually became a part of American culture. It unfortunately struggled with a bad name and has been proven it unfortunately has struggled with the bad name and wrong idea of what it actually is, but today is heavily used throughout our society and has been proven to help with several health issues, and while at the same time still have some negative downsides, but overall is very beneficial. Thank you so much.